Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I am your co-host, Daniel Torres-Dwyer. Hello, Christina Nicolau. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. So today we're going to talk about one of the biggest topics we've discussed in this probably second half of the year, and also the favorite topic of our friends, the CPG guys in the US, retail media. Why are we discussing this, Christina?
I guess, Daniel, retail media has been quite big already in the US, right? So it takes up quite a large amount of advertising spend within brands, and it's picking up in Europe. So it feels like it's very natural that we need to be having this kind of conversation and make sure that we educate our audience. There are lots of brilliant people doing brilliant things out there. So we want to learn as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big movers in the industry in this space is the Mars agency. They've just released their retail media report card, which actually you can find the link to it in the show notes. So feel free to have a look at it while or before or after you listen to the podcast. Why do you think this it's interesting, Christina, this retail media report card?
Well, it's quite focused on European retailers, and that's kind of the level of information that we've been missing, right? We have had a lot of info coming our way from the US and the learnings they have there, but now for the first time we can see stuff on Asda, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Boots, and the likes. Therefore, I think that's exactly the conversations we need to be having, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll also find information from Amazon and, for example, the German retailer Rewe. And this is the first time that these capabilities of retail media are mapped out, retail media network by retail media network. And for those who don't know the Mars agency, they are a connected commerce company with a focus on e-commerce, analytics, retailer shop, and retail media. Have already done very big projects in the US and starting to also make it big here in Europe. So to learn more about this retail media report card and the general state of media in FMCG, we have the pleasure to host today Katrina Smart, who's the Mars agency's brand new commerce media director for Europe.
So hi, I'm Katrina Smart. It's great to meet you guys. I'm Commerce Media Director for Europe at the Mars Agency.
Thanks for joining us, Katrina, and great to see you again. Can you tell us a bit more about your role and scope at the Mars Agency, what your title actually means?
Yeah, of course. So essentially my role, and I'm responsible for growing our commerce media practice here in Europe. So we have a huge commerce media team in practice in the US and growing over in Australia. But over the past few years, we've really been focused on doubling down on our retail media efforts over here in Europe. So my role is to really grow that and grow the relationships with our retailers and clients over here.
Wow, that's quite the scope. And can you tell us a little bit more about your journey? Like, what's your background? How did you evolve in your career to land this role now?
I was at an agency called Gig Retail for about 7 years, and CPM, who are part of the Omnicom group, for about 3 years before that. So all in all, about 10 years kind of retail media experience. Gig Retail is a retail media agency and Asda's incumbent retail media agency over here in the UK. So most of my time there was kind of supporting the Asda Media Partnerships team, working with JBP top tier suppliers on their retail media investments. I've had a few kind of secondments over at Asda as well, working within their retail media network and corporate teams. But also then the past couple of years at Gig, I was leading our retail strategy team, which was an incredible role, working with and leading our Walmart Connect business and relationship in the US, Canada, and Mexico. So it was great to work so closely with such an incredible retail media network and really see that growth that the US has had.
Wow, amazing. And also good on you to make that career move after 7 years in a company. That is normally, and we were talking about that before offline, that I'm a recruiter. So it's always a good idea it's kind of best practice to change companies when you're like at the crest of the wave.
Yeah, it was
even if it's counterintuitive. So well done on that.
I came back off maternity leave as well to and joined the Mars agency. So it was double the nerves.
Wow. Ooh, that must have been an interesting induction period, but you seem to be happy, so that's great. What made you join the Mars agency? Tell us a bit about them, because I know that they're a very big business in the US.
We are essentially a global connected commerce company. So there's just under 800 of us kind of Martians, we love to call ourselves, globally. And we're actually one of the few agencies left that's still independently owned and not owned by one of the larger holding companies. So I've worked with the Mars agency previously in a couple of my roles, working with Walmart Connect, and I heard some incredible things about them and really loved their work. I also loved that they're founded by an incredible woman called Marilyn. So the company is over 50 years old, but our commerce measurement platform is called Marilyn, which is named after her, which is quite a nice full circle.
Yeah, and it's pretty unique that a company founded 50 years ago was founded by a woman. I mean, yet alone founded by a woman today for global companies is pretty unique, but 50 years ago, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And it's so nice that you kind of like take on her legacy. And then now there's a lot of focus behind commerce media or retail media. So can you tell us a little bit more about the story of how you have been working with retail media and especially in the past few years?
Within retail media, so our Mars media operation is pretty huge. So we plan and influence north of $1 billion of retail media. So it's a huge footprint and retail media team that we have that essentially does everything from that planning and strategy through to buying and optimization, and then measurement, reporting, and insight. And we do that across all key retailers across the US, Australia, and in Europe, and obviously Amazon as well. So yeah, it's a pretty big team there. And I guess over the past few years, we've really kind of seen that explosion of retail media that's happened in the US over here in Europe. So it's my role and what we've been doing over here is taking the learnings and best practice that we've accumulated from our experience in the US and bringing that over here to Europe. So we were focused on retail media long before I guess it became a bit of a buzzword over here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because from your experience as well, having worked with ESDA, but also doing these global projects with Walmart, I guess that you personally can also bring that global experience or experience from North America, which is arguably a more advanced retail media market, especially when it comes to the online part. In Europe, you can also bring this knowledge to your European clients, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about sharing that best practice that we've seen across. And my background has very much been retailer side. And now I've kind of flipped it on its head and working very much with our CPGs and FMCG clients over here. So it's nice to give that other side of the opinion.
Yeah, and with your unique perspective and also the Mars agency's unique viewpoint, knowing very well the North American market, other markets, how are you seeing the European retail media landscape also, as it's an area of many speeds? Like the UK is very different to Germany, for instance.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that we're seeing huge growth over here in Europe. It's not quite as fast and obviously mature as the US, but we're getting there. And I think I believe it's IAB that predicts that we're going to reach 26 billion by 2026. So huge kind of growth that we're projected to see. It's a really interesting market, and actually it's really challenging. I think there's a lot of complexities over here versus the US. Obviously, there's geographical complexities. It makes it extremely fragmented. And it's almost as if each country has its own retail media ecosystem kind of bubbling up, where you can see the different media capabilities between, Germany, for instance, versus the UK versus Spain. you see that some markets are much more mature than others. So it's interesting there. I particularly love some of the trends that we see in terms of digitalization in the store and the connected store, especially in the UK. And I think that it'll be really interesting to see how that grows and evolves over the next couple of years.
Which this is an area where they say that Europe is more advanced than the US, no? I mean, you may have a different opinion.
No, I absolutely think we're more advanced in some ways there. So retail media is really born, I think, out of the more traditional in-store and, shopper marketing touch points, and particularly over here in the UK, they were managed by the retail media agencies and by the retailers, versus the US seemed to mostly be managed by external agencies and worked a little bit more siloed. So I think over here we've really seen that, you have a true omni-channel proposition when you're looking at our retail media networks over here, in terms of a real focus on that in-store, albeit some of it might be a little bit more outdated versus the digital and more targeted elements that you can book now.
Are you a savvy consumer insight professional with an interest in AI applications and market research? Discover BoldChat AI, the pioneering AI-powered qualitative consumer research platform that's reshaping the consumer insight landscape. Picture this scenario: effortlessly connecting with your target audience, posing bespoke questions, and receiving insightful responses to address your business queries, all neatly compiled into an actionable report within a mere 24 hours. BoldChat AI streamlines the research process, enabling you to make agile, well-informed decisions at a fraction of the conventional cost. Curious to experience the efficiency firsthand? Visit www.boldchatai.com and embark on your free trial today.
And for sure, Katrina, at the end of the day, it's all about offering this omni experience to our shoppers so that they can have this digitized view of the brand, of the retailer throughout their shopper journey. And you mentioned that retail media is about to hit 26 billion by 2026 in Europe, which is huge. So there's no surprise there that retail media is a buzzword, but I understand that lots of brands have this question of, how do I approach this? Is retail media just media? What's your philosophy on the way that we should approach this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. So we have a huge amount of obviously experience in the retail media space specifically, and our observation, I guess, over the past decades that the team have been involved, is that most brands and agencies treat retail media like any other media discipline. But with that, there usually comes some challenges and leads to minimal outcomes. So we believe that retail media is a lot bigger than that. And retail media doesn't just equal media. So I think that the appropriate way that we see retail media should be viewed is it's retail plus media. So when you look at it this way, you get kind of specific retailer level specialization, you get the nuance and the focus versus that more generalist media approach. So investment decisions, for instance, are driven not just by media considerations like things like lowest CPM or highest ROAS, but also more of the strategic decisions that you decide at a customer level. So looking at that integrated omni-channel experience instead of just some tactical executions. And it gives you that wider measurement view beyond just your kind of media metrics. So it's all about that, how you can impact total business growth for brands. And ultimately, it's all about driving the sale at the retailer at the end of the day.
So it's throughout the funnel activation, right? And not just top of funnel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's obviously there's been a lot of talk about that upper funnel retail media proposition, but it absolutely is now. And I think that obviously it changes from retailer to retailer, but ultimately it should be viewed holistically, but with a retail hat on. So you really think about what's going to drive you the most profitable outcome at each retailer you're looking to invest in.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, now they're comparing like the spend of retail media versus TV ads, for example, like saying that there's going to be more spent on retail media, and nobody would consider the TV to be like a lower funnel type of proposition. No? So it only makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, for people that maybe don't understand the acronyms, what does CPM and ROAS stand for?
Yeah, so CPM is cost per thousand, and it's essentially how you cost up your digital buys, and then ROAS is return on your ad spend.
Got it.
So I think within retail media, the list is growing of acronyms by the day.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to put a part on our website where we talk about acronyms, no, Christina? It could be a good idea to have a dictionary.
Yeah, like a dictionary lexicon at the end. Yeah.
Exactly. And put it on the show notes so people can go to it. So everybody, that we're going to say everybody a lot of times, because there are some big key topics that a lot of people are talking about. And one of these topics is connected commerce, which basically means that it's the commerce proposition for the consumer. They can buy whatever, wherever kind of thing. So physical, digital, like that the consumer is agnostic, but is in all these marketplaces. How does connected commerce and retail media, how do they go together? Like, what's the relationship, the interaction between them?
So essentially, retail media is part of that connected commerce journey, and retail media should sit, and you see the best results when it's not managed in a silo. So you think about that connected commerce journey as a whole, and within that, you'll have retail media, you'll have your e-commerce, you'll have your trade spend and shopper marketing, etc. And essentially, the best way to plan your connected commerce journey is to make sure that you've got touch points across all based on your objectives. But ultimately, it's retail media is a part of, a lever of that connected commerce machine.
I feel that one of the struggles when companies are trying to enter the retail media space is that it's not really standardized, right? When you talk about the traditional media, everyone knows like all the abbreviations and KPIs and what to measure, what is accessible and what is not. So could you please tell us a little bit more about what the standardization of looking at retail media looks like? And I know that you guys have launched the retail media report card recently. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that, feedback you have received and how it's being developed and its usage.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched our retail media report card in the US about a year ago. And it stemmed from our clients not knowing where they should be investing their retail media dollars, because the market had grown so exponentially, so many different capabilities. So our internal teams who are, feet on the ground, working with retailers and retail media networks day in, day out, started to compile a list of all the capabilities so that we could plan more strategically and share that with our clients. We then decided that actually it would be a great idea to release that publicly. With a view that actually the more that we can share out in the industry, the more likely, that we're starting to drive that standardization. So each retail media network can start to see what the others are offering and where the market's moving. So that was a great success. And we recently also launched an Australia version as well, focused on Coles 360. And then I've been working over the past few months on launching our European version. So I'm really excited about this, but essentially it gives you a holistic view of some of the key retail media networks within Europe, looking at their kind of media capabilities that each of them offer, with a view that actually it makes it easier for brands to, I guess, navigate and understand where they should be investing more strategically.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate benefit, that brands and I guess retailers to some extent know what they're doing and what they're spent. And as you said before, their ROAS means for them and what good looks like, because now there's not really a concrete measurement about that, and everybody has a bit of their own say about that, no?
Yeah, and from my own experience, finding benchmarks has been quite difficult in the past. So this is really what brands need right now.
Yeah. Actually, Christina, maybe you can tell us a bit more about that from the brand side. Help me understand.
No, really, when you start navigating this role of retail media, for us, it had been in the past a challenge. And first of all, where does it sit? Because as you said, Katrina, it's not just media, right? So it doesn't sit with a media team. But at the other side, it's not really just driving sales, because it also helps your brand interact with the consumer. So you're also building some kind of upper funnel activation. So it wasn't very clear. And then how do you measure it? ROAS is one thing that was quite, let's say, easily discussed about. But it didn't do justice, because it wasn't just about driving the purchase decision at the moment, but it was rather activating holistically the brand throughout the journey, right? So I would say that for us, this had been a challenge. But I don't know, from your side, Katrina, what other challenges do you see brands having?
Yeah, so I think measurement definitely is number one, as you mentioned. One of the key things that we hear from our clients is that they're not sure how their media is performing, because each retailer has their own methodology and their own reporting and the way that we report attribution windows, etc. So one of our solutions, I guess, is our Marilyn platform for that. So it's a commerce measurement platform, and essentially enables you to have a holistic view of all of your campaigns. And we aggregate and take all of that performance data so that you can understand how tactics perform right down to that SKU level. So I guess measurement is definitely one of them, and that's where a lot of our conversations are centered around. I think the second, as you mentioned there, was bang on in terms of that structure and ownership within the organization. A lot of bigger brands specifically have a legacy structure that's stopping them from looking at the plans holistically. And from the omni-channel lens, or on the flip side, they might have a really strong kind of traditional shopper team that's used to booking their in-store media, but actually they don't have the digital capabilities in-house to be able to look at that new kind of targeted digital element, using first-party data, etc. So I think that structure's one of the key things there. One of the key ways that we've seen, like, helping our clients quickly, is to take on things like their search plans and activate things for them that they might not be looking at in-house yet because of things like structure. So yeah, completely agree with you.
This resonates with me 100%. So when you go and talk with these brands, right, and you get them interested, how would you say they will be able to win? Like, what are the first fixes and the first things they should be looking at?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. So I think that the basics, always start with your basics. We love to start here with clients. So we usually do like an audit and a deep dive on how you might be showing up on retailer sites, understanding, how you sit within that organic search, looking at your product page, because ultimately, no matter how much retail media you spend, if you're driving customers somewhere where your product might be out of stock, or there might not be any imagery, the display and the copy might be wrong, that's a poor customer journey for them, and will lose the sale ultimately. So we normally start there, kind of deep diving on the audit in terms of fixing those basics. I think that collaboration is probably key. And I think, we keep hearing this quite a lot, actually. Retailers all have the same goal. They all want to sell more products. So I would advise anyone to work as closely as you can with your retailer and be really transparent. We do this on behalf of brands we work with. But ultimately, the goals there are to drive things like tests and learns, and, seeing where you can plus up moments in the year and their event calendars to really kind of maximize your brands. I think those are probably some key ones.
Is it difficult for brands to have like a real strategic relationship with the retailer, from your experience? Because also you've been on two sides of the table, and it's difficult to escape that more transactional relationship to a more like long-term value add one.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult, really difficult. And it depends on the merchant or the buyer that you work with. It depends on how your product is doing in the retailer. It depends on the size of your brand. It depends on your marketing spend. There are so many different, factors into that retailer relationship. But I do think it can be harder to navigate retailers and the retail landscape. So I think that's where kind of we come in as well with that kind of retailer expertise. It's really about understanding how you can best leverage your retailer relationships and leverage their retail media networks in order to make sure that you're maximizing for your brands.
And I have one more question, Katrina. Having worked in the e-commerce side, right, I remember having a lot of conversations around the frequency, and like, do you go in waves with retail media, or is it just activating some big selling events, or do you have to be always on? Because we had one side arguing that you need to be always on. Otherwise, you're kind of like losing the past work and investment that you've put into a website. While there's the other side, which is we only need to drive sales. Therefore, we will only put our money there when there is a big event happening. So is there a right approach?
It's a really great question. And actually, my perspective is that you should have an always on plan. You should, have that beat of the drum that's pulsing throughout each retailer, so that ultimately when customers are searching for a product within your category, that you're going to show up and you are kind of top of mind. I think that there's different levels though, and ultimately, it also depends on your investment strategy. But I would say as a basic, you should have an always on plan. You should then look and layer on, timings of your promotions and your promotional calendar with that retailer. So, making sure that you are, when you're showing up in store on a price promotion, that you've also got your media there, both online and offline. And then I guess on top of that, you'd layer on any kind of big launches that you might have throughout the year. So there's so many different layers that you can add on to retail media. I don't think there's a one size that fits all approach. Yeah. But I think that it really depends on your investment strategy and your retailer relationship.
Oh, this is super interesting overall. And on the follow-up of those conversations, it would be the brand side comes and says, here, I have this amazing visual that I have created to put on an out-of-home, bus stop or a billboard or somewhere. So just adapt it and just put it on the website. And I'm wondering, is this enough? Like having that always on approach, if you just have that banner there, which is made for something entirely different, or should you have a different approach because you are aiming to achieve a different thing when you're on retail media?
Yeah, so I think that actually it's a great point, and a lot of the times we see retail media might fail is because the timings are off when you look at your brand marketing versus your retail media marketing. And I think that actually one of the ways that's best to work is to have that fully integrated approach. So if you're working with an agency, and that's what we do day in, day out, we work with our clients above the line agency, their creative and brand agency, and we obviously plan and manage their retail media for them, so we can make sure that the timings align between each. Because ultimately, if you are, like you said, showing up on a bus stop and then you're in store, you might have nothing on, but actually you might just have a little bit of search activity, you're not going to drive the results that you need to see. A shopper should be able to see something out of home and see your brand. They should be able to get an email from a retailer or targeted by the retailer on their way to store, or makes them think about going to store. They should then get to store and see the brand on point of sale and things like that. And then also if they're shopping online or via the app, they should be able to brand messages should come up and talk to customers. So right. It should really have that kind of connected journey for the customer.
Great. Well, this was very interesting. I think that Christina also brought in some interesting points from her own experience, which I love to hear more about. Christina, maybe one day I should interview you directly. I think I wouldn't test you that much, okay? We know each other well, but I wouldn't. I don't have
answers, Daniel. I only have questions, so I don't know how this would work.
Well, you can interview me if you like.
I think you should definitely do that. It should be like the Christmas episode. Should be
that's
flip it on its head.
That's not a bad idea. Maybe coming soon, maybe, but we can't guarantee. So last one for you, Katrina. You're not going to escape this one. With everything you've learned in your career, we were talking about like this recent move you made, which was, I think, very brave. What, if you went to your younger self at the beginning of your career, what would be that one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
Yeah, so I knew this was coming, and I still kept thinking, what should I say? There's probably, I'm going to break it into two. So one of them would be to speak up. I think that there's been, many times, especially at the start of my career, where, you'd sit in a meeting room and you'd have so many different ideas and thoughts in your head, but you might be scared to speak up. And in particular, I felt that, especially when you're around peers and and so on. So I think that, speak up and have an opinion, make yourself be heard, because ultimately there is no bad idea. It's all about, sparking that conversation and creativity. And then the second one would be to lean into things like, imposter syndrome. I felt that when I came back off maternity leave. I think that it's really key to lean into those moments in time where you feel a little bit uncomfortable, because you're at the cusp of developing and growth. So I'd probably say those are two key ones for me, kind of thinking about most recently.
This was Katrina Smart, Commerce Media Director Europe at the Mars Agency. Christina, what are your key takeaways from this conversation about retail media?
Daniel, I think at the intro, we're discussing how big it's getting in Europe. I don't think that we really had an estimate of how big retail media in Europe really is. And I think the numbers are pretty impressive. 25 billion by 2026. That's like in less than 3 years, right? Which is huge. So really big opportunity. And I see a lot of brands wanting to tap into that space.
Yeah, I mean, bigger than TV. It makes it compulsory to be on
Right.
CFO's notes and also basically on everybody's notes right now and everybody's plans.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really hard to distinguish, especially in big companies where they are so much skewed towards traditional media, to figure out that I'm doing something which is different, because as Katrina said, retail media doesn't equal media. So you're not doing the top of funnel, upper funnel kind of activation that you're used to, just to drive brand awareness and, create this connection that you want with your brand. This is more of across the funnel activation. And that's also where it gets really messy when you're trying to figure out who owns it and how do I measure the success.
Yeah. So if anyone needs to influence their colleagues, you can share with them this episode of the podcast. I think it's a great tool. And ultimately, when we started the podcast, we wanted it to be useful to you guys. So do make sure you share it internally.
Yeah, because as Katrina said, it's all about fixing the basics at the beginning, right? So you need to be able to influence to get those clear objectives, make sure your plans are connected and you don't silo retail media because you just sign them over to the key accounts team, but rather work together and collaborate to make sure that you get the best possible result.
Yeah, and remember, by the way, you can download also the retail media report card. It's the first time that it's done in Europe to look at key data across retailers in the UK, but also in Germany, for example. And I think that, Christina, there's a big push towards standardization, which will probably really consolidate retail media as a staple.
Exactly. And as we discussed during our conversation with Christina, it's also about being able to understand what is the benchmarks that you can use, how you can really set the right KPIs and have this level of standardization that you've seen and known in the traditional media for many, many years.
Yeah, well, thanks to Katrina for joining us again. Thanks, Christina, for putting up with me another day. You're getting a reservation in heaven. Thanks to all our guests for joining us today. Remember, by the way, if you're not yet, to follow us on LinkedIn. Probably by the time this is released, over 9,000 followers there, which is great because we've really grown the followership in the last few months. And if you have 5 minutes, if you can leave us a review on your favorite podcast player, that would be really helpful. Thanks again for joining. Have a great day and see you in the next episode.